spotted community. We are in Jackson, Wyoming right now. We're recording this outside, sitting on a porch. We have some beautiful mountains, beautiful trees behind us. And I just want to say, podcasting outside, I think it's the move. It's funny, like we just went through like a good hour trying to figure out how to set up, what to do. We like started recording, it wasn't working out, and I think there's moments you have to know when to walk away.
For the record, it's been 2 hours.
It's been like 2 hours.
That's okay, because sometimes it just takes the patience to get it right, to start talking about something and realize we're not going to talk about that today.
It's really so for reference, we're visiting our friend right now in Wyoming, and we have a few other friends here, and they're on a walk, and I feel like I was getting really pressured of like, oh, they're gonna come back, we haven't podcasted yet, and I just feel like in these moments it's so important to just like not give up. I think sometimes like doing things like podcasting specifically like brings up a lot of discomfort and frustration, and like I get mad at myself and I want to give up, and it's just like you can't.
So I asked you like what that was. Like, what would you describe as that incident that we just had that took us 2 hours to get to here, where we finally feel comfortable and tuned and ready to podcast something good for you all?
Yeah.
And I think we are hitting a level of, what did I say? Resistance? No, I said something else. What was it? Oh, a moment of friction.
Yeah, a lot of
like,
friction.
I think oftentimes like we have moments of friction in our life when things almost feel the worst. In those moments, it's easiest to give up. Or numb out, distract, go and ignore the feelings. And I think we have to go head first into them. And I think in those moments, it's super uncomfortable. But being able to come out of it on the other side feeling a lot better is always going to be better than going in, you know.
What would you describe that friction to feel like for you?
Feeling like, why would I keep going? Like,
right.
Why does it matter?
Kind of like, screw this.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's always like, screw this. Like I'm over this. And then.
But your answer is within meeting the friction and moving forward. That's where your answer of feeling better is always within sticking with what is triggering you or making you feel uncomfortable or what just isn't working. And I think that really goes into what I wanted to talk about today, which is the whole idea of we're going to feel not our best most times in life. We're not going to feel our best willing to take on big projects and big risks a lot of the time. And I think when we don't feel the best, that means we need to keep moving forward, and we need to keep, in that very moment we feel our worst, sticking to the goals we set, or sticking to following through in the podcast. That's what we're told ourselves we're going to do. I think it's really important to listen to your emotions, but I think most times, more often than not, instead of abandoning what's making us feel shitty altogether, we need to reflect on what we're feeling, go inward with what we're feeling, take a pause, and then we need to come back to what we were trying to do in the first place. And whether you're trying to run a marathon, whether you're trying to eat healthier, whether you're trying to start a side project, whatever it is, I think in these moments that we find we are feeling our worst, so we want to abandon it, is the times, yes, to move forward, to feel better, you need to keep doing it.
Well, I feel like in those moments of like, it's kind of, for me, I would describe it as like extreme chaos comes over me. Like I was filming a TikTok when I was home a few days ago, and it was like I was filming a video of me reading an excerpt from a book, and I was like, it was the first time I had done that, so I was on my hammock, I got the book out, and I was getting ready to do it, and I didn't sleep well the night before, and I felt all of this frustration coming up of like, I literally want to cry. This happens to me a lot, where I just feel like I want to cry. I was just like, oh, like, why would I keep going? Like, screw this. Like, then it's almost like that self-sabotage kind of starts coming in, where I'm like, well, this is bad. Why would I keep doing this anyway? Like, you're an idiot. And then, so it took me like a good 40 minutes to keep doing it. And I think sometimes like what I'm learning with making content, doing anything new, or like kind of doing things that feel uncomfortable, is that like sometimes it's going to take you like 2 hours to figure it out. And I think that like if we're always looking to figure it out right away, immediately, you pick up the phone, you make the video, you figure it out, you're putting this like false sense of expectation for things to pan out right away. And I think that's where a lot of our suffering comes in. It comes from expectation, right?
So yeah, I think the lessons are in the process of that example you gave of like, it might take you 2 hours to even get to a place where you want to complete a video. Say in your case, you want to make a video, where in reality that video is going to take you 3 or 4 minutes to film. But sometimes it takes us 2 hours to get to a place where we're ready to film it. And I think you could have given up. You didn't sleep well. You weren't feeling your best. All judgments were coming up. And I think those moments where we want to give up, the lessons are right there in front of us. And I think the motivation levels often dip at that time because you're not feeling good. So you can't even process a reward because you're feeling really shitty about everything. But I think to mention a creator that we follow, Tim Chisano, who's a local New York creator, is that he said he's like addicted to the reward. It's why he's able to continuously, time and time again, do a really intense schedule day to day because he's so obsessed with seeing the outcome. And I think there is like a dopamine drip of like being able to have a slow release to dopamine and recognizing that it might take you the entire day to get it, but you have to keep working toward it versus being like, oh, fuck this, I'm gonna go and just scroll TikTok now since I can't make my video. Like, that's only gonna snowball and make you feel worse and worse, whereas it might feel really difficult in that 2-hour period where you're trying to get to a place where you feel comfortable to make this, but the reward is intangible once you're able to get to that place, no matter how difficult it is in the moment. So I think it's, and this is something that I think our generation struggles with, is instant gratification. So I think taking a pause and remembering, it's like, how do I get back on path versus going down a rabbit hole of getting caught up in your emotions versus saying, what's the best next step forward for me to take? And that might look different depending on, like, I think what you're experiencing. But I think it's really important to just keep on moving. And that might look different. That doesn't mean you need to wake up and drink eggs and go run the stairs like Rocky. That might mean your next step forward is giving yourself some love, taking care of yourself, recognizing that you are not your thoughts. It could look so different. But I think the theme here that I really want to discuss is finding a way to move forward and kind of unpacking what does that look like in different situations.
Just to the listeners, we're recording this outside, so if you hear any background noise, that's just the background noise of nature. Maybe a golf ball or two, because there's a golf course right next door, but okay. Continuing to go down a path when you're not getting a reward while on the path, or you're being met with extreme discomfort, anger, frustration, I think is the hardest thing to do. And I think that's why we give up. Like, we can see this in so many different places in our life right now. It's like when you're going through change, when you're doing difficult situations, like, you have to give yourself grace to understand that, like, you're not going to feel good doing it. Like, you're not going to feel good doing it.
I think that's the recognition, is you're not going to feel good. Taking the steps forward that are going to help you get to a place that's going to make you feel good. I think that there are going to be times that you feel really inspired, and taking the next step forward is so easy that you want to take 5 steps forward. And those are times where you do that. But I think consistency is so important in maintaining your happiness. I think your progress in things that you're achieving. And I don't mean to like take this as like an achievement kind of angle. I mean, I think when I think of like the podcast, it's like my motivations for wanting to grow it is because I do want to be able to have a life where I focus on this and I can grow through it and help others grow through it and make a living off of that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to, quote unquote, achieve that when it's through a mindful lens and it's through a healthy lens. It's not, my value is not coming from it. So I just wanted to give that caveat whenever I mention the word achievement. That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah, and I think there's like so much pressure that always comes up for me. And I think what I'm noticing is that, like, the more I start to really understand why I'm doing the thing I'm doing, the less pressure there really is that comes up. Because I think all that pressure really is like, you get frustrated because you think it means something, that things don't work out right away, or you think it means something about you. And it's like, if you picture this person who's like rocking back and forth and everything they're trying to do, they're just constantly like chaotic. It's like, you have to have, it's like that song, it's like when the bones are strong the house don't fall or whatever. It's like, I think I cited that once, but you have to believe, you have to know your value, you have to know your worth. And I think that a lot of us don't know our worth. We're not confident in knowing that there's nothing wrong with us, and that one little quote unquote mistake or one little mishap is not going to set you off or change your inherent value or who you are. And I think it goes back to like asking yourself, okay, in this situation, am I acting like small me? Am I acting like a small insignificant thing that could just get tipped over by your video you're making for TikTok not working out? Like, why do you think that your value system can be so easily destructed?
Well, I think if you're thinking like that in that moment, it means that you are disconnected from yourself. So I think that 2 hours it maybe took for you to get to a place where it took you 4 minutes to film the video efficiently is because maybe it took 2 hours to connect with yourself. I think that's oftentimes what it was or what it is. I think I look back at my grade school, high school, college experience, education, and it would take me so long to study, to do assignments. But I think it was because it would take me so long to get to a place where I felt connected with myself, where I was able to kind of go into a free flow where I just was able to focus on what I'm learning, not all of the roadblocks that get in between. Because I think when you get so fixated on like, oh, why can't I remember this one word that I need to remember for this test? Well, the reality is if you're judging yourself for that, are you looking for your value from your ability to achieve this? And it's like, well, hold up. Taking a pause there and understanding that you don't need any of this. I think recognizing like taking that time to, if this makes sense, to connect with yourself, because you're going to be a lot more kind and forgiving to yourself if you are feeling connected.
Well, I just feel like it's like I struggle a lot. Like, I think sometimes it's like I go in and out of feeling connected to myself like within a span of 2 minutes. Like, that switch is so easy to fall over, get irritable, or get frustrated, or like want to give up. Do you think that we're supposed to always feel connected to ourselves, or it's about recognizing that there's times when we're not going to feel connected to ourselves, and it's about not judging yourself when you're in those states of feeling shitty and feeling irritable and feeling frustrated?
I mean, why do you think we have this podcast? It kind of summarizes what you just said. We're always kind of going back into the hole on this podcast or reflecting on it, because that's what we don't see reflected in the media really, is the human tendency to fall back into thinking about yourself or being disconnected from yourself. And that's where atrocities are created, is when we are feeling so disconnected from yourself. When you are feeling ultra connected and loving yourself, you're not going to go and scream at your 3-year-old child for spilling the Cheerios, right? But it's inevitable that we as humans are going to feel dysregulated or disconnected from ourselves. So I think it's finding ways to come back and connect. And this is kind of a weird analogy, but hey, that's what I'm known for, I guess, is there was this doctor and he was saying, instead of taking like an hour walk, try to get up and walk every 15, 20 minutes. And I kind of think that's applicable to this. Instead of trying to go months where you feel ultra connected to yourself. And if you can do that, that's great. But also recognizing that you can check in every hour or so if you, or not even every hour, that might feel like a lot, but you can have check-ins for yourself to say, I'm going to take a moment and see where I'm at. And maybe I need to like take a deep breath, or maybe I need to sit in silence for 5 minutes. I think more so learning to make this a part of our life. Like, think of a time, and I know you said it, you like took the bar soph. So think of how laser focused you were on that, where if there was a siren outside while you're studying, you'd get really mad probably and be like, I have to focus, I have to do this. And I think in those moments when like all of the emotion comes up, where we're thinking everything has to be perfect, we have to study really hard, it all has to be right. I think that's when emotion is getting involved. And I think in those moments, that means that there is something going on. So those are the moments we take a step back and say, let me connect with myself, let me regroup. And I don't think, and I'm totally antidotally looking at my personal experience, but I don't think we as a collective do that enough of making a conscious effort to check in on ourselves and take care of ourselves, especially like in modern work culture. So many people will work 12-hour days, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., especially in New York City culture. So there's not really much time if you're sitting in an office all day. It's not really normalized for you to go and take a walk for 15 minutes and connect with yourself. So I think it's really important for us to find ways to normalize connecting with ourselves. I mean, at work, wherever we are, because that's going to make our days so much more efficient. Think of it like this, Soph. Took you 2 hours to make that video because it took you that long to connect with yourself. What if the day before that, every 15, 20 minutes you were able to check in and connect with yourself? I'm not saying that you should do that, but I'm just kind of like looking at it. It's like, would you have already been connected with yourself? I don't know. Maybe not. I'm just kind of throwing ideas out there. I think it's something to think about. The more often we are pouring our cup up, the less often we're going to have to fully pour it back up. Like we just put a little drop in each day.
I'm having a lot of realizations right now during this conversation because I feel like I've been really tense the past few days, and I feel like I've been taking everything really seriously. And I think as we're talking about, okay, connect to yourself, okay, great. I definitely think that is really important to do. And I think that's like the core of so much of what this is, right? Like connecting to yourself. But I think something that I'm just recognizing now, it's like you can decide in this very moment to let go. You can decide in this very moment to begin again. Like we can always begin again. I think back to the Sam Harris waking up app meditation that when I first started meditation, I used his waking up app, and he would always just say, begin again, right? It's like the concept of time is an illusion. Like when you really zoom out and you like right now, like I guess going through your emotions without resisting, letting them really take their normal time span allows you to get to the point where you can have the understanding and the awareness of what's happening. And I think you kind of reach that end point where you're able to be like, oh, that's what just happened. And then I think from there, you're like, oh, wow, I was so caught up in it. And you're like, oh, I don't need to bring all that stuff that just happened 10 minutes ago into this moment. I can let go right now. And I think that because we're so caught up in an idea of ourselves, like Sophie is somebody who is existed from the time I was born and exists until the time I die, right? And if you're looking at Sophie, or if you look at anybody from a lifespan perspective, everything you do in every moment is going to matter so much because like you're constantly adding it and accumulating it to mean something about this identity that you're building. It's like you picture your identity as like you're building a house, right? And you have all these blocks that are keep building and building and building. So when you put one brick that doesn't look the way you want it to look, you're going to feel really upset because that then you think that brick that you're perceiving to look bad is a part of your house, of the identity. So you're going to get really frustrated. But if you can recognize that like we're not building any house, we're not building any identity, there is nothing being ever created. You are constantly in this moment, perpetually for eternity until the end of time. There is no past, there is no future, there is nothing but now. You can recognize that it doesn't matter what that brick looks like because that brick doesn't mean anything about who you are because you're not anything but now. Who you are is constantly being defined in this moment again and again and again. So it's like when we think, and this is all from reflection about how I've been acting the past 48 hours internally. It's like when we think that who we are is built upon life experiences and each very moment versus who I am is right now. Who I am is talking into this microphone on this podcast is who I am right now. I am nothing else. And right now in this moment, I am everything. And I think earlier you're asking me, or you're like, we're talking about what does it mean to get caught up in the illusion? I think that's what it is, right? It's like you think you're this idea, like you think you're Sophie or Daisy or any of these things, and you're like, those are just labels and concepts. And I think if we can break this up into two parts, it's like getting caught up in the illusion is getting caught up in your thoughts and who you think you are, your name, your identity, your path, your career, all these things that you think mean something. But when you come out of that, you just realize that like none of that's me. Yeah, it's powerful recognition that I think is hard to have sometimes.
So one of the things I took away from that I kind of want to break down is when you were going back to the Sam Harris Waking Up app, which for those of you who don't know, it's a meditation app. And the notorious famous question is, where is the thinker? Can you find the thinker? So ponder that one. That one really frustrated me in the beginning when I didn't comprehend it, but now I find it really helpful. And I think that wind's okay. Sorry if you pick up that wind right here. That'll be interesting to see if the wind's picked up. But I think asking where is the thinker is really helpful, because the reason why you may shrink from saying what you actually want to say in front of your group of friends is the exact same place as to where asking where is a thinker is stemming from, is because if you think you are the thinker and are so sure that you are the person making up these ideas, then that goes back to thinking, oh, the idea of Daisy is really important, and I'm really embarrassed if I say the wrong thing that everyone else is going to say, oh, she said that wrong. Kind of going back to the idea of being afraid to be seen trying. But I think when you take a step back from all of that and say, where is the thinker? There's a bug. Where is the thinker? You get to remove yourself from all of the chaos and all of the pressure and all of the value seeking that comes from the idea of what Daisy would be doing in order to achieve value. So I think with all that being said, I think being able to take a step outside of yourself and you can let go of yourself. You can let go of this idea that's holding you back, that's upsetting you. You can always start over. Just because Daisy or just because Sophie is a lawyer for 5 years, all of a sudden you can say, no, I'm not. I'm not that anymore. All the things that came with that, that's not who I am. That was just something that I'd experienced. And that was more so giving a very concrete example. But I think it could even range from you start to feel something come up that you think what you said didn't sound right. Who cares? Move on to the next thing. That happened. That's not happening right now anymore. But I think it's all goes to say that the present is what is really happening. Reality is right here and right now. And if nothing bad is happening right now, then why are you upset? That's not to dismiss what comes with healing and taking care of your emotions, but I think oftentimes being able to say, you know what, I'm gonna let go of that little thought in my head because it's not serving my actions right now. I'm recognizing now the little like tick in my brain is saying we started this conversation talking about no matter how you're feeling, keep stepping forward. I think this applies to that because I think this tool can be helpful when you do get caught up in yourself of saying, and that does prevent you or take extra time to accomplish what you've set out to accomplish. I think that using these kinds of tools can help ground and center, kind of like what I was saying of like, how do I reconnect with myself? Well, sometimes maybe it's reconnecting with yourself, and sometimes maybe it's reconnecting with the idea that you are everything. And that's kind of what this latter thing connects with, of like recognizing, you see that beautiful mountain over there? Like, I'm made of the same materials as that. So it doesn't really matter what I say right now. It doesn't really matter what I do. It takes the pressure off. And I think that's really beautiful because you recognize everything is connected. And I think that's kind of the deeper level of connecting with yourself, is connecting with the butterfly that lands on you, right? Like you realizing you are everything. That person you just said something to that you think was stupid, that you said, recognizing you both are the same thing. I think that can really alleviate the pressure and the stressors that come with the idea you hold of yourself.
I have two things I want to say in response, but I'll say the one that's top of mind right now. I think it's almost like saying connecting to yourself perpetuates the idea of division. Because you're kind of like, oh, I'm going to connect to myself, but you're like, because then that's perpetuating the idea of Daisy. Yeah. But there is no Daisy.
But I think people are in different places and it takes different understandings to get there. I think
Right. Well, connecting to yourself is kind of like the gateway to recognize,
Exactly.
oh, I'm everything. So I also want to say, and I think this is really important. Someone asked me on my Instagram page the other day, and it was funny because I did a Q&A, and I felt really uncomfortable doing the Q&A because I was like, who am I to have someone ask me a question? But I did it, and I got questions. So constantly get proved wrong on this journey that like you're not what you think you are. But anyway, she was like, can you share a little more thoughts and ideas about not feeling stuck? And I was thinking about it. I wrote a response back, and what I said is that the idea of permanence is an illusion. Everything is constantly fleeting. Like this moment is gone. Before you can recognize the moment is here, it's gone. Our bodies are constantly decaying as we're getting older. Like constantly, our cells are changing. We're constantly changing, and the only way to feel stuck is to be caught up in the idea of permanence. It's like the classic Buddhism, like the whole idea of impermanence. Impermanence is the only thing that actually exists. Uncertainty is the core of our existence. So if you just said something to someone and you still feel stupid about it, you're getting so caught up in thinking that thought is permanent and that means something. But there is no such thing as permanence. And I think that's why people really struggle so hard to comprehend, like, oh, I can just leave my job. Oh, I can just get up and do that. Oh, I can just decide right now that I don't want to be that person I've been for the past 10 years. It's like you can, because the only reason you continue to perpetuate that person that you've been is because you wake up every morning. Let's just say you wake up every morning, you put on that mask, and that mask is, oh, I'm someone who can't do things. So it's like asking yourself, or rather gaining the recognition and the awareness to know that you are the one who's putting on that mask every single day, deciding that you are that person. Nothing else is telling you you're that. Nothing else. So it's about knowing that you can wake up, look into your closet, see that mask, and say, I'm not going to wear that today. And that doesn't have to be a big ordeal. It could just be as simple as that.
Yeah, it can just be that simple. Well, it's funny. It is funny because then you can start to see how caught up we get. And I think incorporating a little humor is always helpful. Like look at someone like Jim Carrey, who is so known for his hilarious humor, and recognizing that you don't have to take yourself that seriously. Like he plays like these really extreme, funny, ridiculous, absurd characters. And kind of you're able to see that with acting, someone truly is just playing a character. But if you zoom out of the Hollywood, out of the movie screen into our reality that we've created as humans, you start to see that everyone's just kind of playing a character. So who's to say that you can't change your character? I think a quote he had was, if you're depressed, like you're just tired of the character that you've been playing. So it's like, stop being that character. Give yourself a break from those thoughts. Give yourself a break from how that person sees himself. Let go of that person altogether and allow yourself to just experience what is happening right here, right now, in this very exact moment. I think as I'm looking around at the mountains, taking a moment, those mountains don't have an idea of who they are. They don't have consciousness. And I think with the consciousness that we have, there is a lot of responsibility that comes with it, that we don't have to get so caught up and take it seriously. This is always what it comes back to, I think, is that it doesn't have to be serious. And I'm having a montage of me saying that in every episode ever.
I am also laughing right now because it's just like, oh, I'm coming out of it. And it's funny because I think this is, you could sit there and you can ask yourself, why do I even do this podcast? And it's like, because we fall into the trap of illusion daily. Like, it's a trap.
So what I asked earlier, I think it was on this podcast, because we've tried to record several times, but I asked you, what was that moment where it took us 2 hours to record an episode, where we ended up starting over, going outside, changing everything? That was a moment of us connecting with ourselves, of getting reconnected, reoriented. And I think that one of the big things to recognize there is that we were out of tune. We were caught up in this idea of ourselves, and we were taking it very seriously. And that's why I love doing this podcast, because it always brings you back to realizing it's not that serious, and I don't have to take myself that serious. And that's the goal. No one should have to. But that's why we do this podcast, is because we get caught up in it constantly.
And I think if you're listening to this, it's just let this serve as a reminder that, like, if you're worried about something, if there's something on your mind, if you're caught up in it, it's just like, you can decide right now to let it go. You can decide right now to let it go. And I encourage you to do that because there's so much beauty that comes when you do. I'm having a major realization. Are you also, Daisy? Like, major realization right now?
For sure.
Are we kidding? We're like in this beautiful Wyoming mountain and I've been like caught up in my head for 2 days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this kind of goes back on par with when we were in Joshua Tree National Park and we're podcasting. We were so in our heads and we couldn't appreciate it. And we were even saying we were so aware of it when we got here, because transition, any sort of transition, is always going to shake you a little bit. But I think being able to, I don't even know how we were able to come back to this conclusion of recognizing we are in the illusion. I think, one, recognizing how have I been feeling, expressing how that is, letting that out. Not to say we should ever discredit how we feel, always give room for that. But then I think, three, recognizing, oh, starting to come out of it. Once you start to feel it, once you've felt your emotions, you realize, well, I'm actually not that. I'm not what I think I am. I'm not any of that. But I think I kind of see, when you aren't able to really deeply feel your emotions, that really is going to be like an impasse. Like, you're not going to be able to recognize, you can't bypass your emotions to recognize that you're everything. I think that that's like a literal thing that you have to give yourself compassion for. But I think after that, it's kind of like, well, not that serious.
Well, I think it's just like feeling your emotions, processing your emotions, becoming aware of them, developing some sort of rhythm where you can recognize you are not those emotions, but still be able to experience them, allows you to enter into flow state again. Because I think when we have a buildup of emotions that we're not processing or not feeling, it accumulates into this large cloud of resistance. And I think that resistance is what gets in the way of you experiencing the here now, because you're just fighting against yourself. You're fighting against yourself. So this view, I'm just like, this view is beautiful. I think that might be it for today's episode, because I think that we were clearly struggling, and now I have like this level of awe right now, just looking around at the mountains, just being like, you're not who you think you are.
So it's time for us to unplug and go put that into practice.
Go put that, because the hardest work is always in practice. But
yep.
So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being a part of Life Unpotted community. This podcast is literally, it's everything.
It is. Well, not to do a hard switch, but if you're still here with us, we didn't do it in the intro. Do not forget to follow this podcast. Go and follow it right now. If you are on Spotify, go follow the podcast right now, because that is what's going to help us grow it. That's what's going to help us get really cool sponsors. And that's what's going to allow us to have even cooler, more in-depth content. So if you like this podcast, if you value it, go follow it. That's my ad for right now. That being said,
thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week, and try not to think about yourself too much.
Okay. See you guys.